world of cable news screaming and social media echo chambers, it's easy to lose the signal in the noise. Every day, policy is debated, votes are cast, and your tax dollars are spent. We cut through the headlines to bring you the critical context you need, focusing on what's really going on in news and politics. Welcome to the Analytical Iowan Podcast. This is your daily dose of fact-driven politics. Let's analyze today's news. Here's Eric.
And we are back here on the Analytical Iowan Podcast. It is Sunday, January 4th, as you are listening to this. And of course, we got a lot to talk about because there's always a lot to talk about. Now, of course, the big story still is this attack on Venezuela. And Donald Trump, in the early morning hours of Saturday morning, the 3rd, he authorized the military to go in to Venezuela. There was an attack. They bombed some stuff. They sent us a team in. They captured and escorted out the president and his wife of Venezuela and brought them back to the United States. Now, there's apparently going to be a criminal charge against Maduro and his wife. And part of this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. They want to charge them for gun law violations, and I didn't see anything about trafficking yet, but a bunch of other stuff. And none of this makes any sense because they didn't mention cocaine, didn't mention fentanyl, and I don't think they mentioned actually drug trafficking in any of their charges. But they want to charge them for crimes in the U.S. Well, how can you charge a foreign national, the leader of a foreign country, a sovereign country, with crimes in the United States when they weren't in the United States when those crimes took place? Doesn't make a lot of sense. But see, this is the same administration that has tried to indict Letitia James 3 or 4 times and has failed at every turn. Now, with the Letitia James indictment, one of the problems was the fact that the prosecutor that was trying to bring those indictments had never done that before and was improperly appointed. But beyond that, they were fishing, trying to get some kind of charge that they could use and that they could get a conviction of when it came to Letitia James. So that is an entirely different scenario there, but they failed numerous times. So I think they're going to fail with this Maduro indictment. Now, some people are saying that Mamdani, the mayor of New York City, has got the ability to step in and do something. Not really. These are federal crimes that are being charged, and it is, federal detention and all those things. The mayor of New York City can't really supersede the federal government. It doesn't work that way. And I'm seeing tons and tons of jokes now that Maduro has made it to New York City. Some are saying, "Well, yeah, they made it to they made it to New York State." I should say. I don't know if we're sure if it is New York City. He's back in Venezuela because ICE got a hold of him. Now, some of that stuff is pretty funny. It's misinformation. It's not accurate, but it's funny nonetheless. But Donald Trump talked about this was going to be a regime change. Well, he didn't go ahead and they didn't install the winner, or who is presumed the rightful winner of the election last year, the opposition candidate to Maduro. No, she didn't get the position as president, and she won the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, I'm sure that had no bearing whatsoever in Donald Trump's decision. So who did he put in? He put in Maduro's VP. That's who is now running the country. And all of the people that Maduro had in place are still there. They didn't change the regime. They didn't do anything other than capture Maduro. This whole thing is probably going to end up being an exercise in futility. Now, they are trying to say that we are going to get access to all of this Venezuelan oil, and the oil is going to pay for any cost in regards to us occupying Venezuela. except we don't own Venezuelan oil. And that was the other thing that never came up in the indictment. They never mentioned stolen oil. Now, the administration, the Trump administration, has been trying to claim, as part of their seizing tankers and other things, that Venezuela has been stealing oil from the United States. But how? Venezuela has oil, they have oil fields. And now, supposedly, we are going to help run them, and American businesses are going to come in and they're going to build a bunch of infrastructure to help Venezuela pump out this oil and let Venezuela make money on it. How is the United States going to make any money on that? How is that going to pay our costs? Are we going to tax the oil companies? No, wait. Donald Trump and Republicans like to give tax breaks to rich people, so that ain't going to happen. And then Donald Trump said something else. Now, when it comes to Donald Trump, you don't know what he actually is thinking because he says a lot of things that he thinks sounds good in the moment. Then he thinks about it later and he says something else that sounds better, or he gets flack for something he says and then he changes his tune. But he said these oil companies are going to build the infrastructure for Venezuela to produce all this oil. Then he said, but we're going to reimburse them. We're going to reimburse the oil companies. These companies that make billions and billions of dollars already, who are poised to make even more money with this Venezuela deal. And we're going to reimburse them. That sounds insane to me. But that's what Donald Trump is saying. That would mean the US taxpayer would be on the hook for anything related to Venezuela. And I thought Donald Trump was all about cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. I thought he was about cutting spending. You know, that has been the Republican talking point for decades, that our deficit's out of control, our spending's out of control. We got to be fiscally conservative. But yet, whenever Republicans get in power, they run the bill up like it's nothing. But then they bitch about it when the Democrats are in power. And that's what's going to happen with this. This is going to run the bill up. And then when Democrats are back in power, as soon as potentially 2029, when I think they will have control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency, the first thing out of Republicans' mouths are going to be, what about our children? They can't afford to keep paying the taxes to offset this. We're bankrupting this country. We got to watch our spending. All while Donald Trump continues to run up the bill. This is ridiculous, and Republicans should be held to task. Now, this whole story with Venezuela, there's a lot going on here. And this administration has not said that they are going to stop at Venezuela. They've even hinted that they could continue. They've talked now about Cuba. And why bring up Cuba? I have no idea. We haven't really talked about Cuba. Cuba hasn't been really much of a consideration on world politics for decades, at least a decade or so since the death of Fidel Castro. I think his brother Raul is still running things, but I'm not entirely sure because we don't talk about Cuba. It's one of those countries that's just it's not the forefront of world politics. We used to hear things bits and pieces when Fidel was in charge, but even then we kind of left him alone. Now Donald Trump has his sights on Cuba potentially. Now or he's back on his maybe we should do the same thing to Greenland. And what about, he used to talk about Panama and taking back the Panama Canal. Is he going to do the same thing to Panama to get us the canal? What about Mexico? He talked about going after cartels. What about Canada? He keeps saying Canada should be the 51st state. Where does he stop? And who stops him? Well, the people to stop him should be Congress. Now, we will see when they come back into session tomorrow. And probably by the time I record tomorrow's podcast, we may have an idea of what this Congress is going to say in response, but I'm not expecting them to do much, in part because of Speaker of the House Mike Johnson being a weak motherfucker. He is a spineless, gutless piece of shit who is basically serving at the pleasure of Donald Trump. He is there because Donald Trump wants him to be there because he will do whatever Donald Trump says. Now, I had thought that maybe Mike Johnson could be have been voted out over um, any number of things, and it hasn't happened yet. Doesn't mean it won't. One of the last things Marjorie Taylor Greene could do tomorrow, when she is in her last day as a member of the House of Representatives, could be calling for a vote to vacate the chair. And it wouldn't take very many Republicans to side with all Democrats, and Mike Johnson would be out of a job. Now, would the Democrats get rid of Mike Johnson at this point? Why not? They don't have any reason to defend Mike Johnson, to save Mike Johnson, to help him out in any way, shape, or form. Why would they? Because he's done nothing but fuck them over at every turn. He purposely delayed swearing in Representative Grijalva for 6 weeks, kept the House of Representatives out for 6 weeks in order to avoid discussing a government shutdown, in order to avoid talking about the Epstein files. And Mike Johnson has done very little in the way of anything. Now, there have been several items that have been brought up with discharge petitions around Mike Johnson as Speaker of the House. And this is going to be coming up I think this week, there's going to be another vote on a discharge petition. This one is on a clean 3-year extension of the ACA subsidies. And that vote could happen potentially as early as tomorrow. I'm not sure what day that vote is going to be held on. Now, I don't know that 3 years is going to be where it ultimately ends up. But if they have enough votes in the House of Representatives, even though the ACA subsidies expired 6 days ago, 5 days ago, whatever it was, at the end of the year, they still think they still have a little bit of time in order to fix the problem that they created, and that they can maybe pass something by the 15th and that they'd be fine. Now, I don't know that 3 years is ultimately where Donald Trump ends up signing off on and actually agreeing to put into practice. Why? Because he might say 3 years is too long. Now, I think it's going to be 2 years. And why? Why 2 years? Well, this year is midterm elections. They're coming up in just over 10 months. We're getting into the heart of primary season. And the Republicans are not going to want to have to answer questions about health care. They already have enough on their plate trying to answer the fact that they've gutted Medicaid, Medicare, and that rural hospitals and other places are going to suffer because of it. And they've got enough horrible problems they have to answer for that this administration has done. Now, when it's all said and done, they are not going to want to have to answer those questions this year. That's why I think they kick it at least 2 years. Now, if they do 3 years, if they do pass it for 3 years, that would mean it would be up for renewal in 28. And I don't know if they would want to deal with that. Why? Because 28 is a general election. And if you go to 29, well, then you're into the next presidency. This whole situation is a powder keg for Republicans. They're going to want to pass something. And with this discharge petition, they could potentially have to hold a vote. Now, I don't know, because there's a lot of people pissed about the ACA subsidies. And now that they've expired, there's even more people pissed. This could be similar to what happened to the Epstein files. And if it is, expect the Senate to take it up and move quickly. Now, if they pass this ACA subsidy thing anywhere over 300 votes in the House of Representatives, I think the Senate would pass it. Why? Because that's a veto-proof majority. I think the actual number ends up being somewhere around 290. But if they get over 300, I fully expect the Senate to pass it. If it cracks 400, expect the Senate to pass it unanimously, regardless of what Donald Trump says, because the pressure is going to be on Senate Republicans to end up passing it because they have with the discharge petition. We know they have 218 votes in the House. It is going to pass. The question is by what margin. So then it is going to be up to the Senate as to whether or not this makes its way to Donald Trump's desk for a signature. And the more Republicans that sign off on it in the House, the more pressure it puts on the Senate to continue and to go along with it and to help extend the ACA subsidies. Now, what is unclear is if they do extend the subsidies because they have expired, is what is going to happen to people's insurance. Are they going to get a break this year? How is that going to work? What is that going to look like? Is there going to be another enrollment period because some people had opted not to get coverage? Now, I didn't think the ACA subsidies were going to expire. I didn't think the Republicans were that fucking stupid. But apparently, I've underestimated the stupidity of Republicans yet again. That they were dumb enough to let these things expire, all while everything else is going on. Now, as they're dealing with that, they have to deal with other things when they get back into session tomorrow. And some of this is stuff they should have been dealing with already. But if they had had a different Speaker of the House, if the Democrats had been in control of the House of Representatives, they would have been back in session yesterday, the 3rd. They should have been already drafting articles of impeachment against Hegseth and Donald Trump, etc., for anybody who was involved in this attack on Venezuela because it was unlawful. And Donald Trump, as I talked about earlier, and as I talked about significantly yesterday, he basically flipped a middle finger to Congress and said, fuck you, I don't need you. I'm going to do what I want. And if Congress does not respond, well, that just emboldens Donald Trump to do even more. Now, are they going to do anything? I don't know. Apparently, there is talk that the Senate is going to vote on a war powers resolution, and that would limit Donald Trump and the military from doing anything further in Venezuela, including putting boots on the ground. However, the damage has already been done. Donald Trump has already done what he set out to do, and that was go after Maduro. Now, the New York Times put out an article, and in it, they were talking about why did Donald Trump go after Maduro and why now? Well, apparently, part of it has to do with Maduro going to these campaign events and things like that around the country of Venezuela. And he would be dancing to music, and Donald Trump took that as an insult. Now, apparently, there was maybe a voiceover that was insulting the United States. Not 100% sure there about that, or if that was added in clips after the fact. But this administration or this president said, I don't like the fact that they're dancing and he's celebrating. It's a slap in the face to the United States. So I'm going to go get that son of a bitch. And that's what they did. But yet, what did we hear going into the 2016 and the 2024 elections? Oh, we can't have a woman president. She's going to be too emotional. She's going to operate on emotion. She wouldn't be able to make the cold hard decisions because she'll be operating on instinct or on emotions. And what's going to happen if somebody insults her and hurts her feelings? She's going to go to war. But Donald Trump took a guy dancing on a stage as a personal insult and sent the U.S. military to basically kidnap him, take him away, and hold him in the United States custody while appointing and choosing his successor over dancing. If this story is true, and I believe it would be, because why would the New York Times publish this if they didn't have decent sources? And I know the people on the right are going to say, well, it's the New York Times. Oh, they just hate Donald Trump. No, they just publish things that are true that make Donald Trump look bad. There's a difference. The right has lost their ever loving minds, and now they're bending over backwards trying to defend everything Donald Trump has done. Now they're coming out, and I did a TikTok on this. It's probably going to be up by the time you see this podcast, uh, where I said they've lost the plot again. They lost the plot with Zorhan Mumdani taking the oath of office on a Quran. And of course, they say a lot of things about that aren't true. I'll get back to that in a minute. Um, but then it comes to this whole thing, and they've lost the plot with it as well, trying to say, well, oh, you guys on the left, oh, you're supporting a dictator. You love Mamdani now. No, two things can be true at the same time. We can dislike Mamdani and think that he is a dictator and needed to be removed and was an illegitimate leader of his country, while also saying how Donald Trump went about doing it and what he did was illegal. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. There are ways that these things should have happened. How it was done here is not the way it should have happened. Okay? The UN is saying what we did was wrong, that we shouldn't have done it. And of course, they're going after us. Now, Donald Trump does not like the UN, and it wouldn't surprise me if he tries to pull the United States out of the UN. Wouldn't surprise me in the least, because they're another group that tells Donald Trump no, and he doesn't like that word. He is like a petulant toddler who has never been told no in his life, and now at 79 years old thinks he can do whatever the fuck he wants because he has surrounded himself by people who are glorified yes men. They say, "Oh yeah, whatever you want, Donald Trump, you're doing great. You're great. You're the best there is." And they make it their mission to kiss his ass at every turn. It is the weirdest thing about how far everybody around him will go to defend Donald Trump. Now, we are going to see if Congress will make any sort of move against Donald Trump over Venezuela. Now, I had thought they'd make the power play against him because of the Epstein files. But if they decide to move against him for Venezuela, they've got the same problem. Okay, doesn't matter if we're talking the Epstein files or we're talking Venezuela. Here is what I think will happen. If there is a Republican led impeachment effort against Donald Trump right now, and it actually makes the floor for a vote, and they may have to use a discharge petition to make it happen. Because I don't think Mike Johnson, who will do anything to for Donald Trump, would actually, you know, allow it on the floor for a vote. That if that happens, and there is a vote in the House of Representatives on impeaching Donald Trump, expect them to already have the votes lined up in the Senate to get rid of him. Fully expect it. Why? Because the Republicans aren't going to embarrass themselves by impeaching Donald Trump just to lose in the Senate. Now, if after the midterms, Democrats have the House and they don't have the Senate, but I think it's possible they could have the Senate, but either way, if it happens that Republican leadership is controlling the Senate, you could see an impeachment without a guarantee of having the votes to remove Donald Trump. Why? Because Democrats would hope that by showing everything to the public, that it would just out Donald Trump and change the tide of public opinion and get people to turn their way and vote for them. Doesn't always work out that way. But if the Republicans, when they're in control of both chambers and their guy is president, I firmly believe they wouldn't make a move unless they knew they had the votes. Now, they could do something like what they did with Nixon, that they could go to Donald Trump and say, look, Donnie, between the Epstein files and Venezuela, we've got enough on you. We're going to remove you if you don't resign. Could he resign? Yes. Will he? Probably not. His ego wouldn't let him. But then again, if they offer him a full pardon like what Ford did for Nixon, Donald Trump may say, "Yeah, that's what I have to do, and I'll do it," because he is worried about staying out of prison above and beyond everything else. Donald Trump is terrified of staying out of going to prison. He does not want to be in jail. He doesn't want to be held accountable for any of the things he has done. And those are getting more and more numerous. Now, I've been mentioning the Epstein files. And while all of this is going on, I think the Venezuela situation is a big distraction from the Epstein files. More documents have been released by the DOJ. And some of these are not nearly as well scrubbed as the others. And they mention Donald Trump. Now, they don't say Donald Trump did anything wrong, but they mention Donald Trump flying on Epstein's plane at least 8 times, including several flights with Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, that is bad news for Donald Trump, who desperately wants to avoid being connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Not because he's remorseful for anything he may have done with Epstein or anything like that. No, it is all about he knows how bad it is in the court of public opinion and what he would look like and how it would appear for him if he were in the Epstein files. It's all about maintaining his appearance and maintaining this idea of how uh, popular he is and how strong he is and all this. He doesn't want that image of being a loser. And being connected to Epstein right now is not popular. It would make him a loser, and he doesn't want that. So he is trying desperately to deny ever being on Epstein's jet, ever knowing Epstein. And even the DOJ is now trying to just say, well, some of the documents in the Epstein files, they may not be accurate, they may be lies, they may be bogus. But if they're bogus, why do you still have them? Now, tip sheets are one thing, and we've talked about some of the tip sheets that have come in. But this was an email that came out from the DOJ in like 2020 that said they had evidence that showed Donald Trump had flown on Epstein's plane with Epstein and Maxwell. Why would that be in there if it wasn't true? Right? This isn't a tip sheet. This isn't an I think, maybe, kind of, sort of. This is we have proof that he was on the plane, which means those records are in there somewhere and they just have not come out yet and been made public. And that's what Donald Trump is terrified of. So he does things like goes into Venezuela, and now he's talking Cuba or maybe Greenland or Mexico or Canada or wherever. Donald Trump is trying to avoid the files, and this is just something else he's trying to juggle as it goes. Donald Trump is terrified. And beyond that, he's terrified of his own mortality. Now, he doesn't want us talking about his health, and he thinks that anybody who says anything bad about his health could be committing treason. Well, no. We have one, freedom of speech, two, freedom of the press. And we're allowed to talk about his health. But see, if we say he's in bad health, he doesn't like it. Donnie doesn't like being called out. Now, we don't know, did he have an MRI or did he have a CT? Because now he's saying it might have been a CT, not an MRI. Again, still don't know what they were looking at. He has no clue what they were looking at. But if it was a CT scan, I'm pretty sure CTs are only used for brain imaging, which gives more credence to the fact that they were looking for something mentally wrong with Donald Trump, potentially dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that. And he keeps talking about taking these cognitive tests and how he has aced them. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, he has repeatedly talked about taking what he calls cognitive tests or aptitude tests, or he's even called them IQ tests. But then he goes on to describe them. They'll give you a few words, and you're supposed to remember what those few words were like 10 minutes later. Well, that's part of the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. Okay. Then they will give you like a small thing with like 10 numbers on it and 10 letters. And you're supposed to connect A to one, B to two, and see if you can make those connections. Okay. Then they'll give you like three animals, three pictures, very generic animals, maybe an elephant, a camel, and a frog, or a lion, or something like that. And they just want you to name what it is, close enough that they know that, you don't have to be super specific, but enough that it's evident that you have rational thinking or you have some cognitive ability. There's a couple other questions, and one of them Donald Trump would get wrong in any year other than right now is who's the current president because he'd say himself. Well, um, then they'd ask you to draw a clock face. And as I've talked about before, it's not about drawing a perfect artistic, like museum quality picture of a clock. It's drawing a simple clock face. And we're talking an old school analog clock. Now, this part of the questions may end up going away at some point with the younger generations because analog clocks are less and less common as everybody switches over to digital. But they were asking you to draw a clock face, and they're looking to see how close to an actual clock do you get. Do you have all of the numbers there? Are they in the right order? Are they roughly in the spots they should be in? Did you number it backward? Did you bunch it all to one side or the other? They're looking at all of that, and then they will give you a time, and whatever time you currently can think of any time. They'll ask you to draw that on a clock. They'll say 3:30 p.m. or 3:30. Write down, draw a 3:30 on the clock, and they want to see how well you draw. Again, not about artistic ability, but can you make it look roughly like where it should be? Is the hour hand going roughly where it should be? Is the minute hand going roughly where it should be? Is it close? That's all they care about. And there's a couple other questions that I'm not overly familiar with, but it's all those kind of questions. Now, most school aged children should ace this thing, other than, I think there might be a couple simple math questions on there, maybe. Um, But for the most part, most people would pass this. And they do not give you the Montreal Cognitive Assessment unless they are worried about something going on with your mental state. Now, sometimes they will do it for concussions, not always. Sometimes they do it for strokes or dementia fears or other brain injuries, and they want to see where you are at so they know what they need to work on you with, and then it's comparing as a baseline. Are you getting better? Are you getting worse? But Donald Trump doesn't want us talking about any of that. And this comes also as he is talking about going into places like Cuba, and Marco Rubio, I believe it was saying, well, they're facing, senile, incompetent, dementia-ridden leadership or something to that effect, as we are staring at what's going on with Donald Trump, going, and what about us? Now, with everything going on, Donald Trump doesn't want us talking about his health, and his health is not improving, it's getting worse. He's not going to make it to the end of this term. I just do not believe that. I could be wrong because he's kind of like a cockroach. Um, but I don't think he makes it to the end of the term. I think something happens. You know, that the Big Mac finally gets him or something like that. And I mentioned the Big Mac because he doesn't eat very well. What did I see his normal McDonald's order is something like two Big Macs, a fillet of fish, and two large fries or something like that. It was a lot of food. And this is coming from somebody who likes to eat. And I'm saying that's a lot of food. Um, he's not healthy. Now we have this bruising going on with his hands. And he doesn't want us talking about the bruising on his hands. But this is all tied into the potential problems he's having cognitively. Why? Because I think the bruising is from IVs, that he is getting some kind of an IV treatment, whether it's dialysis, whether it's IV fluids, whether it is an anti dementia treatment of some kind, and he wants us to believe that he is rigorously shaking hands all the time, and that is why his hand is always bruised. However, now the bruising is starting to appear on his other hand, on his left hand. Well, then that wouldn't be the case, and this is new bruising. So I think they are starting to put the IV in the other hand because they're incapable of getting a good IV going in his arms. And the hand becomes one of the next spots. And if both of them are in trouble, then they move on to the next spot and the next and the next. Um, but I think the bruising is from continual IV treatment of some kind. Now, Donald Trump would never admit this. Um, but then he also comes out and says he is taking 4 times the recommended dose of aspirin. Now, normally, if you are worried about heart attack or things like that, and your doctor puts you on an aspirin regimen, they give you 81 milligrams. Donald Trump claims to be taking 325. Now, that could lead to a whole bunch of other problems. But one of the things is it thins out your blood. Now, you want thinner blood if you are having coronary artery problems. And a lot of times that's if they're worried about heart attack, things like that, but they're also worried about sometimes about clogged arteries. And that could be the case with Donald Trump because of his diet. We know it's not very good, and that this could lead to other problems. Now, all that being said, he has claimed that he has been on these for like 20 years or 25 years. Well, if that were true, then why didn't he bleed like a sieve when he supposedly got nicked in the ear when he was shot in Butler, Pennsylvania? Oh, wait, that ear is miraculously healed. Your ears don't heal like that. So I don't know that he was actually shot. Now, he may have been injured. It may have been a ricochet of a piece of glass or something that nicked him. But if he has been taking these blood thinners, don't you think he would have been, uh, his blood would have had trouble clotting as bad as it did, or it wouldn't have been he would have been bleeding profusely, not just a little bit of blood to make it look like he was hurt. This is the problem with Donald Trump. Whenever he fucks up and he lies or he changes something around, he does it in a way that makes us question more about what is going on. He can't keep everything straight. He is struggling. Now, during that press conference on Saturday where he talked about everything that happened, after he gets done talking, either before or after he was talking, one of the two. I haven't actually watched the whole clip, so I don't know where it fit in the thing. He appeared to fall asleep. Now, some people could say give him some slack because it was 4 in the morning, but that's a lot of the time when he is out on Truth Social and he's hosting up a firestorm. But he wasn't doing that. He was in this press conference and he was struggling to stay awake. Now, this is just another example of Donnie dozing off. And when it comes to Donnie dozing, um, he doesn't want us talking about that either because, again, it makes him look bad. This is all things that he would bash Joe Biden for. Donald Trump is not doing very well physically, mentally. It is only a matter of time, I think, until he is incapable of being president. Now, Republicans may be left with a choice before long where they have to invoke the 25th Amendment and remove Donald Trump. If you ask me, we've already passed the point in which that should have been an option, where that should have been the primary thing that had happened. He should have been removed a long time ago. Why? Well, when this comes out, the story breaks that he removed uh, Maduro because of dancing, and he took it as a slap to the face. That is not the sign of somebody sane and competent and in the mental that has the mental capacity to run a country. Now, let's talk about MAGA for a minute. And I said before that they missed the point, that they missed the point about Venezuela and how we on the left do not necessarily support Maduro, and we can think Maduro is a problem, all while not liking how Donald Trump was handling the situation. Now they have lost the plot on that. Okay, they think in a term of yes no, right? That okay, we don't like how Donald Trump handled the situation, so we must support Maduro, and that's not the case. They miss all of that nuance. But beyond that, now there are videos out there of Venezuelans celebrating Maduro being removed. And from what I understand, those are videos from uh, other foreign countries where Venezuelans are in exile, that they are not welcome in Venezuela, so that they are celebrating the fall of somebody they didn't like. Now, it sounds like the VP, whose name I don't even have a clue um, what it is. I saw it in an article, but I just can't remember it. I'm sure I'll get it figured out in the coming days as we see more stuff coming out. But um, this guy apparently is just as bad or worse as Maduro. Donald Trump did not put in the opposition and actually make things better. But MAGA looks to these videos that they're seeing of Venezuelans celebrating and saying, well, see, they're celebrating that we got rid of him. We did a good thing. Donald Trump was great. If dancing and celebrating in the streets proves that what you did was the right thing, does that mean that that proves that in 2020 electing Joe Biden was the right thing? Because people were celebrating and cheering and dancing in the streets when Donald Trump lost. Oh, wait, that doesn't fit your narrative, does it? They don't want to think like that because, they want you to believe that uh, Donald Trump rightfully won 2020 and that anybody who celebrated was just evil and wrong, etc. But in this case, they're using people celebrating as justification for what they are doing. MAGA is getting their talking points from places like Fox News and right wing commentators and some MAGA, influencers online. But some of those online influencers have been proven to be foreign based uh, creators. And it's all troll accounts and things like that. That's why I block all of them that come to my page. Um, but when it comes down to it, MAGA is trying to justify everything Donald Trump did in Venezuela. And they are going to probably try to justify a long term occupation of Venezuela as well, which again is ridiculous. Why are we in Venezuela? Why are they talking about boots on the ground? None of this should have happened. I talked about that yesterday. There the biggest thing and the biggest reason I think that this all happened has to do in part with oil. I think it was always going to be on the radar. And then now, if the New York Times is to be believed, Donald Trump took offense to the dancing like a petulant toddler and said, okay, we're going to do something and we're going to do it now. And that's why we got to where we are. Now, is Congress going to act and do anything? Doubt it. And what's it going to take? Or is it going to take him going into a second country or a third? Is it going to take him trying to take over Canada before they step up? I don't know. I don't know what it's going to take for this Congress to act. But it is proving yet again that Republicans refuse to hold their own accountable and that they need to know exactly what we think of them. And this situation in Venezuela is probably going to end up being very similar in result when it comes to elections to what happened in 2000. Was it 2002 or was it 2006? One of the two, after the Iraq War started, that people were pissed off about us going back into Iraq. and it flipped part of Congress back to the Democrats. And it led the way to Barack Obama becoming president. Now, what I think is going to happen in the midterms is that I think Democrats have a good chance to pick up 40 plus seats, maybe even 50. It entirely is going to depend on how the next week goes with the ACA subsidies and things like that. If they end up getting extended, and then they are going to have to, if they don't get extended and we go all year with people's health care being completely outrageous, I think 50 seats may even be on the low end, especially if Democrats get out and they get competitive in a lot of other districts, in districts they never considered before. I think there is a chance that we start flipping races and sending a very clear message that we're sick of Republicans. And then when it comes to the Senate, it is entirely possible that the Senate could flip. Why? Well, there's tons of places where there could be gains. Now, Graham Plattner in Maine, he's gaining a lot of steam. And I can never remember the Democrat, the establishment Democrat, that is trying to primary him. And she is like 76, 77 years old, long term establishment, centrist Democrat. And I think Graham Plattner has a good chance of winning the nomination. Now, if the Democrats do something funky and somehow end up picking the establishment Democrat instead of Plattner, Susan Collins probably has an easier chance of winning. But Susan Collins could lose to Plattner very easily. And one of the problems with Susan Collins is that she's always concerned, but never does anything about those concerns. Now, I guarantee you, with this war powers resolution, she's probably going to say something like, well, I'm so concerned about Donald Trump and spending more money in Venezuela and him going into other countries. And we probably shouldn't be doing that. But I'm still not going to vote for the war powers resolution to prevent Donald Trump from doing anything further in Venezuela or other countries. She'll have her concerns that make it sound like she would vote in favor of limiting Donald Trump and his ability to do anything militarily, and then vote against it anyway. She did that numerous times with varying things, including voting in all three of Donald Trump's Supreme Court picks from his first term. He was concerned about all three. She was concerned about all three of them. Still voted in favor. Okay, so Graham Plattner could win Maine. Go down to North Carolina. You got Roy Cooper running for the former governor, who is term limited, but very popular in North Carolina, running for the Senate seat. Could win? Yes, definitely. Why? Because he's already won statewide multiple times and is very popular. If he wasn't term limited, he'd probably be running for governor again and could potentially win a third term or a fourth term. I think it's two terms in North Carolina for governor. Could be wrong. It's hard to keep track of every single state. Um, and then you go to a place like Ohio. Ohio could be up for grabs. Why? Well, you got Sherrod Brown, who is a Democrat who has won statewide before. Now, maybe crazy to think that Ohio would go for a Democrat again, but it's possible. Possible. Again, if people are pissed off enough about how bad things are and things are going, you add in the ACA subsidies, now Venezuela, and all things in between, it's possible that they say enough's enough and go back to a Democrat. You have Alaska as a potential pickup, which is, I think the Democratic nominee is Mary Patola, um, who could potentially win. Um, you have Texas with Jasmine Crockett, who is gaining a lot of steam, who could potentially be a rising star in the Democratic Party. And if she takes Texas, that would be huge, and that would be a big boost to her and her political future. You have Iowa, Here in Iowa, we have an open seat. Why? Because Joni Ernst decided to chicken out and not run for re-election because she opened her mouth and said some things she should have said when it came to healthcare, specifically saying, "Well, so what if you don't have your healthcare anymore? We're all going to die anywhere. We're all going to die anyway." That's not quite what she said as far as so what if you have your healthcare? No. But when asked about cuts to Medicaid, she goes, because the constituent asked her, well, what about cutting Medicaid? If you cut my Medicaid, I won't be able to have insurance and I'll die. And she goes, well, we're all going to die anyway. Effectively saying, so what if you have insurance? We're all going to die anyway. It proves how out of touch these Republicans really are when it comes to everything. And that was only one of the comments she made when it came to health insurance. So she's not running. Now, I haven't seen exactly who is the front runner. I don't even know if there is currently a front runner for the Democrats. But with it being open, that there is a chance that the Democrat wins Iowa. You add the fact that Kim Reynolds is fucking around with food stamps here in Iowa. Now, I haven't heard much as far as backlash yet about the new food stamp program. Um, and I haven't heard that it hasn't taken effect. I haven't heard for sure that there's any backlash, but it's also early in the month. But there was a whole list of things that were not going to be allowed as early as January 1st of this year. And with changing food stamps, and you can see any of my other podcasts where I talked about all of the things where you're not going to be able to get under food stamps, um, it is only a matter of time till people want to hold Republicans accountable. And it's entirely possible that they don't stop just with statewide elections here or state level elections, that it continues and it gains traction all the way to the Senate seat here. There are multiple avenues for Democrats to pick up enough seats to flip control of the Senate. I already think the House is a guarantee. It's not a question of if they get the House, but a question of by how much. And the only thing that could potentially save the Republicans is if when they get back to work tomorrow, that they come out and they impeach and hold an impeachment trial on Donald Trump over Venezuela. It won't happen. I don't think they're going to make that move, but that may be the only thing that could save the Republicans in the midterms. But I don't know if that would be enough. Now, at some point, I have been saying all along, I think they are going to get rid of Donald Trump and move on to JD Vance. And I still think that is true. I just don't know when they will make that move. And either way, when they make the move, I've already seen how they are planning to campaign either in the midterms, in the general, or both. If it's before the midterms, they are going to run on this strategy of saying, well, you need to give us 2 more years with JD Vance in charge. He's got to fix all of the mess from the Biden administration, and he just got there. He needs a favorable Congress to get things done. Now, they're not going to pin any of the blame on Donald Trump. They're not going to do it because they don't want to alienate the MAGA base. But if they remove Donald Trump ahead of the 2026 midterms, if they remove him ahead of there, they're just going to say, well, JD Vance needs to get to work to fix all of the Biden problems and do it like that and try to say we need to give him a Republican controlled Congress to get that done. If it's after and they decide to get rid of Donald Trump or he croaks or what have you, they're going to say, well, JD Vance was in power. Sure, he was president, but uh, Democrats were in control of the House and maybe the House and the Senate. So you need to give him 4 more years and give him control of Congress so he can get stuff done and actually fix everything. I can see their strategy already because that's always their playbook. Now, the one thing I don't think they are going to do, because I think Democrats would be wise to step up and stop it, is some people have suggested the idea that they could remove both Donald Trump and JD Vance and try to get somebody else in there as president. Now, this strategy would involve Donald Trump going down, being removed, JD Vance becoming president, appointing a new VP, that VP surviving the congressional approval process, and then Republicans moving on Vance to put that reasonable Republican in there. It's a bold strategy. I don't think they're gonna take it. One, I don't think they're that bright, and two, I don't think Democrats are gonna fall for it. I think the Democrats would see right through it and actually save JD Vance just because they want the Republican Party to suffer with JD Vance as president. So we got more coming out about Venezuela. It looks bad for Donald Trump. We got more coming out about the Epstein files. Congress is back in session tomorrow. We're going to have to see what they do in response to the files and in response to Venezuela and everything. We're going to keep an eye out for that. I will be back tomorrow with another episode because there's always so much to talk about. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. Hope you have a great day, and I'll be back again tomorrow.
That was Eric. That does it for our analysis today. If you appreciated us cutting through the noise to get to the critical context, please make sure you're subscribed to the Analytical Iowan podcast on Spotify and YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.